Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And Happy New Year to everybody. And I'm here with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
Yeah, it's going fine. And I'm pleased to say, looking over here, that most of my investments are up.
Yay, yay. I was going to say, it was nice to actually see some snow. We didn't actually have any snow in the 2024 portion of winter. I mean, we had some flurries or whatever, but we never had any snow actually on the ground. Although, to be fair, it's almost all melted now.
Yeah,
But
so I was up before, while it was still dark this morning, and didn't bother to open the shade because why do you want to? So, turned on the fireplace and curled up in my easy chair with my iPad and started getting news for everybody, right?
right.
And so finally I thought, okay, get up, make some coffee, open the blinds. And I opened the blinds and I thought, oh my God, look at the snow. So yeah, it came as a surprise to me this morning. I wasn't aware we were supposed to get any.
So yeah, so it was kind of surprising to see. And like I was telling you, I've had like a flock of birds and stuff, and it's just like, man, maybe the birds are just confused. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Well, let's talk about the big thing in the news.
Yeah.
So we don't talk about terrorism much here on our show, but because it's not usually that applicable to electric vehicles as a rule. But we'll start out. We'll talk a little bit about New Orleans. So New Orleans is what? There's 15 dead, another like 30 something wounded. Two police officers were injured. It's kind of an interesting case because while it's somebody that, by their name, I'd assume they're of Middle Eastern descent, but I can't really say for sure. They rented a F-150 on Turo and drove, and I don't know where they rented it, but they
Lightning, apparently, the electric.
Oh, was it? Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't aware of that it was a electric vehicle in this one. Okay, so I brought it up because what's interesting is there was the Las Vegas Cybertruck explosion yesterday as well, and the Cybertruck was also rented on Turo, and while they know who the driver was of the New Orleans attack, they're not 100% on the Cybertruck attack.
Well, yeah, apparently they do have a name for him now.
They do have a name. They know who rented, because it was also rented on Turo.
Right.
It was also rented on Turo, and the person who rented it on Turo also had served at the same base in the U.S. military.
The other guy.
So both of these guys were ex-military, but the one in New Orleans was somewhat radicalized. He'd been praising ISIS on social media recently, and said he was inspired by ISIS. But it was kind of odd because he's a realtor in Houston.
Yeah.
And I was like, and former U.S. military, and it's just
I gather he retired from the military, so he was in for at least 20 years.
I didn't know about the retirement part. I know that he got out in 2020 from the reserves, but he had served in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
As well. It just, but it's just hard to fathom.
Is that a name that he adopted? And did he have because it's obviously a very Arabic name that he's listed as, but I don't know.
Last name was Jabbar.
Yeah, right. And I'm just wondering, whether he did a sort of Cassius Clay, kind of a thing and changed his name. So
I'm sure we'll find out more.
We're learning. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact he had an ISIS flag kind of
it's kind of made a giveaway. And apparently, his brother, commented that he had obviously been radicalized at some point. So
yeah, that's just
it's just why? What does that accomplish? I mean.
Yeah, it is just really hard to fathom that somebody, at first, the first thought was maybe somebody had slipped through the border and done this, and it's like, no, it's a U.S. citizen.
That's what the incoming guy there in the Oval Office, stated that the guy was, why he's against, immigration. Well, the guy is American citizen, apparently born.
Well,
raised.
look at the Fort Hood incident that happened.
Yep.
If you remember the Fort Hood incident, that was a guy who got radicalized that had been a psychiatrist or something like that in the army. And and then went on a shooting spree. That was really, I guess you just never know. I mean, there's always going to be crazy people, right?
Well, yeah, you just, you wonder what is there about their life experiences, plural, that drove them to that point. America's got problems and things that we need to be working on, and we're not perfect. It's we might be a light on the hill, but sometimes it's a glimmering light. But still to go to to adopt the philosophy of Islam, where people are executed by chopping their heads off, and crazy attitudes about women, and it's just don't know.
Oh yeah, it's different to see some of these things happen. But then, so you have the New Orleans incident, and then you have this Las Vegas incident.
Yeah.
Now, the Las Vegas incident, at first, I saw this news. It says Tesla Cybertruck explodes.
Yeah.
It's like,
and I
okay,
knew that.
we know that batteries don't actually explode. No. So we're like, well, how did it? So I thought at first, it's like, okay, so a Cybertruck somehow caught on fire, but people like to call that an explosion. But no, this one literally exploded.
This one did. And you can see the fireworks, secondary explosions after it blew the top off of the back deck of that.
So they know who rented that Cybertruck. They rented it in Colorado.
Yeah.
But they took it to Las Vegas, to the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. And but later they found out it was full of fuel canisters in the back, and fireworks.
And fireworks.
That's kind of a random. I mean, you can get some pretty powerful fireworks. I mean, I wouldn't want to see a fireworks stand, catch on fire and explode. That's for sure. But it seems really. I mean, obviously, having fuel canisters in the back of a Tesla Cybertruck doesn't make any sense, right? So we know this was something intentional, but the fact that the driver committed suicide, I find that, rather unusual. And he didn't. The person who rented the vehicle, while they haven't given a lot of information about the guy, just by his name, he sounded European.
Yeah,
of European descent.
Yeah,
so
I know it wasn't obviously Arabic. It was a very Anglo, Western European.
Yeah, I mean the timing, the fact. Now, lots of people use Turo. I mean, it's a car rental platform. Okay, so if you've never used Turo, it's simply people that own vehicles rent them out, and where vehicles tend to be very successful is when it's vehicles that you can't rent at a car rental place.
Right.
So like in this particular case, if what Bill's saying it was an F-150 Lightning, you wouldn't be able to get an F-150 Lightning from a car rental place. You certainly wouldn't get a Tesla Cybertruck from a car rental place. A lot of people who buy Teslas test them out on Turo by renting them for a couple of days before they own them, because it's a good way to get some real experience driving one and seeing how you feel about it. Okay, well, renting a Cybertruck, people do that, but they usually don't try to blow
They usually don't
up.
travel from Colorado across the desert, Utah, over the mountains of. I've driven that route. You go over the pass, down across Utah and the Green River area, and then you finally get, at the end of a long interstate drive, you finally get to Las Vegas. That's a long, bloody drive. So he obviously made a number of stops along the way at supercharger stations to whoever was actually driving it, whether it was the guys that rented it or whether it was, some guys, somebody else. I guess we'll have to wait for autopsies or whatever. I assume he was in the vehicle when it went up. I don't know.
Well, they said somebody was in the driver's seat. when it exploded. But anyways, they're not giving a lot of information. That, like I said, the similarities so far were the timing. That they both rented electric vehicles on Turo, and maybe there was intent with the F-150 to blow it up, but they didn't indicate that there was any explosives found with the F-150.
Well,
They said they found IEDs, but they were located at various locations around the French Quarter.
The French Quarter, right? Exactly. So whether
not in the vehicle,
right? So whether it was somebody who was, I mean, this is all still open. There's still, I guess there's no point in our reaching any necessary conclusion because it's still an ongoing investigation. It just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So it's pretty wild to see this because at first, my first thought was, when they use the word explosion with the Cybertruck, it's like, no, it didn't explode. But yeah, actually, it did explode.
No,
it's just
that's not
the stuff was in the back.
That's not the characteristics of a thermal runaway event in a vehicle. Though they happen, we have to admit they do happen. But
to put out the Cybertruck, they did have to use a thermal blanket.
I love that.
Las Vegas.
I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so Las Vegas fire department had a thermal blanket, and they threw it over the thing to extinguish the fire. Right. So I don't know. I'm assuming the battery had ignited, and maybe it hadn't. I would assume it must have in a large scale explosion. Of
course, most of the explosion went up, and that basically preserved the Trump Tower. And there were 7 people injured, but I'm guessing that was probably from the fireworks that went off and things like that. But yeah, whether it actually got down into the batteries, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I just thought, it's kind of wild to think about that. That's
well, I was kind of amused. I don't know if that's the right word. Elon Musk comment is, he sort of figured out that this, was an obvious terrorist thing fairly early on because that's not how things explode. So he says that the guys, their first mistake was they picked the wrong vehicle. Because the way the thing is built, everything went up instead of out.
Oh, so it didn't explode horizontally, exploded vertically.
Available in the videos. The only thing is it took that, roller top, it blew that off, and you can see that in the video explosion, the exterior security camera video. But no, nothing. You look at the sides of the exterior sides of the vehicle, there's nothing there. In fact, in looking at there was sort of an aerial view looking down into the bed of the vehicle. You can still see the cans and things that were in there. So whatever went up and didn't go down. So I'm suspecting that the battery pack did not burn. Maybe, went through the upholstery and stuff like that, but no.
We do know for certain that they weren't fans of EV World. Okay. So even though they may have been renting electric vehicles, really didn't, they weren't fans of ours, because if they had been fans of our show, they would have known for the job they were doing, they should have rented hydrogen cars.
Oh, yeah.
The Toyota Mirai, what is it? The Ukrainians have been using them. They figured out how to use the hydrogen cars.
Don't give anybody any
ideas. No, I know, but I'm just saying, it's like, you weren't very smart. Yeah. EVs aren't a rolling bomb like people try to say they are in some of the news. They just aren't. But a hydrogen car, whole different story. You could have, well, anyways.
But I mean, it all depends on how the explosives were rigged and things, because typically, the one test that I've seen that was done about a decade ago, the tank was punctured, but all of the energy of the flame and everything went straight up, and the thing was gone and out like in 90 seconds. Whereas the gasoline car that was, tested alongside of that, the gas pooled below it, and that fed the fire up, through the vehicle. So it's a little bit different. So I suspect it's, it's how you rig it, and I don't want to know how to do that, and I don't want us to explain to people how to do that. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just saying we're pretty certain they're not followers of ours. They would have known.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. Oh man. Sorry, I don't mean to make light of
Tragedy.
A tragedy. But anyways, let's move on to our next story. Yeah. All right. So we got this article, Bill, you suggested why executives think the U.S. auto industry is headed towards a breaking point. Now, it's funny. I see news all the time. Well, people don't want EVs or whatever. And it's like, but you and I see the pressure that's on car manufacturers because you've got Tesla and the Chinese auto manufacturers essentially they're sucking up bandwidth. They're taking up sales. They're all over the world. And people are changing to electric vehicles. It's just, they're not changing like that. Not everybody's rushing out. Well, for starters, not everybody's rushing out and buying a new car, right?
Oh.
And so
they're building them really good and they last a long time. My Prius is like not quite brand new, but darn near brand new. 70,000 miles on it. And why do I want to, trade it in? It sits most of the time anyway. But that being said, I put up a story last week or so showing the growth pattern. Did we discuss that one? Showing the growth pattern of new technology, cell phones, and the flat screen TVs and all that. Electric car.
Laffer curve.
Well, it's I don't know what the
I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
Following the very same trajectory as all of the previous electrical electronics products that we've introduced into the market. The electric cars are following the same trajectory. Flat, gradual, bang, and then plateaus.
Right.
And that's exactly the same trajectory that the electric cars, our EVs, are on.
Well, look at even something like compact disc players. So you had cassettes, and then in the late 80s, compact discs started coming around. It started to be a popular thing.
Right. Yep.
And so you have digital music, and you look at it, they probably weren't really a big thing for more than about 10 years before MP3s started coming out in the music industry. And now everything is streaming music, but you basically had this digital music compact disc that it really only got about a 20-year lifespan. And you would have thought that would have stayed on a lot longer. You think about that. I mean, cars still have the players.
I have cardboard boxes back in that room right over there that I'm pointing at with CDs, VHS tapes, cassette audio tapes, right? That the family have collected over the past 30, 40 years. What am I going to do with them? Because now you're right. Now everything we want if I want to watch something on television, I get it streamed,
Yeah. It's crazy how much that's all changed, isn't it? Yeah. I was going to tell you something interesting as I've been, doing some more research on reasonable used cars. The Mini Cooper EVs, while they don't have a very long range, they're more of a city car, kind of like your Fiat. They have about 115-mile range, something like that.
Yep.
They're now considered to be the most reliable EV made. And I've had experience where I've owned a Mini Cooper before, and paying to get one of those things fixed was not fun. Yeah. But none of the things I ever spent money on to get one fixed exists in an electric car. Yeah. And Mini has really improved their quality, but it's kind of tempting.
Are you thinking about it?
It's tempting. It's tempting.
It's tempting, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, and the funny thing is, as a large, tall person, the Mini is incredibly spacious inside and really, it's fun to drive, but it's kind of like you like driving a go-kart, right? They're fun to drive,
Right.
but you wouldn't want a go-kart for your daily driver. That's kind of about what it is. I mean, they're real, like I said, they're really fun to drive, but they're not as comfortable as most other cars.
Yeah.
So you sacrifice some comfort for the ability to corner ridiculously fast.
Well, but then too, remember that if it's a city car,
Yeah.
who cares? You don't spend more than 20 minutes in it anyway, right?
Right. No, I get that.
It's not like driving from here to Kansas City or, God forbid,
Right.
Denver or Chicago, right? I don't have to sit there hour after hour after hour. I mean, I've actually I had my, just after I got my Honda Insight number 1, the little 2-seater, I drove that sucker all the way to Detroit. And then later, my wife and I drove it to the Mount Rushmore and back. That is not a comfortable ride, but it got us there. You know, it'll do it. But no, if you want something big and comfy, you make long trips, and get something big and comfortable.
All right, so let's go back to this. You know, what change is on the horizon for the major automakers, whether they want to believe it or not.
Yeah.
Now, we know the automakers believe it. I see this stuff in the news, like nobody wants EVs or whatever, and it's like, you know, the dealerships model isn't working well for EVs. I think, did I tell you about the story about the guy looking at a Rivian? You know, he was considering, you know, he wanted a large SUV, and he looked at the EV9, right, and he didn't like the way the Kia dealership, you know, treated him. You know, Kia and Hyundai are a major player in the EV space, but they are a traditional auto dealer. You know, so that was a little bit of a different experience, but it was the same experience you would have going to buy a gas car. Okay, it wasn't any different. And Rivian and Tesla are in the direct sales model, which still has some questionable issues from state to state, whether you can legally do that, because the dealers have some protection in a lot of states that you can't do the direct sales model.
Yeah, in most states.
Yeah, so there's some differences there, but the problem is the U.S. auto manufacturers haven't really figured, other than Tesla, which is the most profitable of the EV car manufacturers, haven't figured out how to make EVs at a profit. They lose money on every EV they make, and this is the case of, we're talking Stellantis, Ford, Chevrolet, right? So we know that Volvo's figured it out, Hyundai's figured it out, okay, but the U.S. auto manufacturers haven't. But
basically,
when we
Asian companies
have figured it out. Volvo is a Chinese brand, even though it used to be Swedish. But anyways, it's interesting to see what's going on here, because more people are sounding the alarm. It's like, hey, what are the U.S. companies going to do? Because you know, while the Chinese may not be able to sell easily into the United States, they still are dominating. They're going to dominate the rest of the world. And so it's just a matter of time before we see, you know, how much that affects the U.S. automakers. It's interesting. I mean, you're still going to have the U.S. auto market, which is what, second largest auto market in the world?
Yeah, it's the second now.
Yeah, well, it's been the second for about 15 years. I mean, it wasn't like it just got passed up recently. I mean, the Chinese auto market's been larger since, I think, like 2010. I mean, it's been a while that they've dominated the auto purchasing side of things. But anyways, just saying, it's a day of reckoning is coming for the U.S. auto manufacturers outside of, you know, Tesla. I think Rivian will be in a good spot in the next couple of years, but it'd be interesting to see. I mean, Ford is trying. I mean, Ford and GM, they're trying. They got a lot of vehicles out there. It's a matter of when they first start figuring out how to make them and actually make money, because Tesla is making vehicles for so much less money than the US makers. Oh, what we got? A comment here. The truck bed seem talking
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah. I agree with you,
for
Alex. Yeah.
okay, so maybe the battery didn't, but I do know
Well, I
they
don't think
deployed
the
the
battery did.
thermal
Yeah,
blanket.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was, I think, really smart, precaution, and obviously, it didn't do anything to the thermal blanket, because you could see them pulling it off, and pretty much intact. Again, I know it's available. I think I've posted stories on it before. I've never seen one, and I'd like to. Hey, you guys, who want to send me a swatch? I'd love to. I'd love to see what that looks like. We'll talk about it.
Oh, about the thermal blanket. Yeah.
Yeah, the thermal blanket. Yeah.
All right. Let's
Well,
move
while we're
on.
on the, yeah, while we're talking about U.S. car makers and things like that, and we mentioned the fact that the Chinese are going gangbusters. Like well over half of their cars now in China, new cars sold are now
About
electrics.
50%. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a blogger, a guy. It's called Joe Blogs, that I follow mainly because he tracks the economy primarily in Russia since the invasion. That's when I picked him up. Since the invasion of Ukraine, and what the various sanctions are doing to the Russian economy. He also then occasionally focuses on the Chinese economy. And this particular blog, he actually took on the question of what impact, if any, is the European tariffs having on Chinese exports. He makes mention of the fact that how cost effective it is to for the Chinese to produce them and so on. But he makes a comment there that sales since the implementation of the tariffs, the sales of Chinese EVs in Europe has been impacted. Not significantly, but not drastically at this point. I guess we got to get more data and see what happens moving forward. So I just mentioned that because it's an interesting counterpoint to all the articles we hear about how successful the Chinese and the competition that they represent. And there are issues that that the Chinese have to deal with on a global scale. And I think it's helpful to be aware of those before we get too excited about their products. Also,
Yeah.
there's some realities here.
Well,
So anyway,
so one of our topics today is China hits EV target 10 years early.
yeah,
Still hasn't reached its 2020 nuclear target. So their goal was to hit 50% of all cars sold in 2035 to be fully electric, plug-in hybrid, or hydrogen, with 95% of them being fully electric. Apparently, they will hit that a decade early.
Yeah.
Yeah, with their hydrogen numbers being something like 0.02%.
Yeah,
0.02% of a percent.
Pretty depressing.
Pretty close to zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had somebody else, or people saying hydrogen is the future and all that, on some older videos the other day. And I'm just like, Bill, you and I, we try to look for the good in hydrogen. We really do. We don't see a path for the success of it.
Yeah, not at this juncture. I don't. Maybe for long range commercial aircraft. If they get the blended body aircraft where you got lots of space to put compressed hydrogen tanks and things. But wow, beyond that.
We see people all the time that have read an article or seen a video and think that hydrogen is the next big thing. It's like,
well, hey,
you're doing hydrogen for a long time.
I was at Ford Motor Company when they made the big announcement that they were going to get seriously involved in hydrogen. I was there, and everybody was excited about it. And this was like 2002, something like that. But then they all began to realize that, well, maybe there are issues. I mean, one of the issues, for example, is parking garages. And you know, the shops where they worked on their vehicles, you know, doing their conversions and things. And I've actually driven around the Ford test track out north of Detroit. I've actually driven a hydrogen powered, I think it was a Ford Focus or something like that. It wasn't fuel cell. It was an internal combustion engine powered by hydrogen. And it worked. You know, it wasn't anything that got me excited, but it worked. But one of the things they said is, look, we have to put hydrogen sensors in our garages where we're working on these things because we don't want an explosion. It's so hard because it's such a tiny molecule. It's so hard to keep hydrogen constrained that it's awful easy for it to find someplace to leak. It's going to leak, and then it's going to, you know, it may, because it rises, unlike petroleum, which falls, it, you know, rises to the ceiling, and, you know, it could collect there and, you know, cause a devastating explosion. You know, somebody, you know, hits a piece of metal and causes a spark, and boom, up it goes. So, I mean, and they said we're going to have to do this for all the parking garages in the future. So you know, they began to realize that it's not the magic bullet that we thought it was going to be. And it's, you know, it's taken a few decades. Maybe we'll come up with some solutions. I mean, you know, one of the early experiments was to use nickel anhydride metals to act as a sponge and absorb it. And then you could apply a little bit of heat to that sponge, metal sponge, and that would release it. And that would be a safe way to store it. Well, yeah, but then you're carrying around all the weight of that, you know, nickel metal hydride, and just doesn't make more sense to use that to make hybrid batteries. You know, so all these realities that we come across. That isn't to say that 15, 20 years from now, somebody comes up with a way to solve it, but I don't see a pathway forward at this point.
No, you know, we looked at the long range trucking. We looked, and the big thing was that Nikola was doing something which is making hydrogen trucks. They were trying to do EV trucks at one point, but they sold their battery division. They're doing a partnership with Walmart, but I don't know really how large that partnership is. And, you know, it's just a matter of, you know, and with somebody like Walmart involved, you could speculate that maybe Walmart has internal plans. And Walmart's big enough that at scale, if they decided they were going to have all these hydrogen trucks, it would make sense, right? Just like the idea of Amazon and Rivian working together.
Yeah, there is an application. It was actually one of the very early applications of hydrogen in an industrial setting, and that is in forklifts. There was you know, traditionally what happens is the old forklifts had lead acid batteries. They'd operate for some length in the shift. You'd go back into the storage area and they would exchange the heavy lead acid battery for a new freshly charged lead acid battery. So they thought that's really sort of unproductive. We got to have, you know, battery spares and so on. So then they took a look at, I think, nickel metal hydride, but the big shift was to take a serious look at, and I think Toyota did this, I believe, to look at hydrogen fuel cells for forklifts that would allow them to operate, you know, through a complete 8-hour shift, you know, take it back into the refill area, refill the hydrogen in a few minutes, and it's back out and it's being productive on the warehouse floor. So that's one application that seems to make sense. Another application would be ferries that operate either, you know, in the coastal waters or operate, you know, on like the Puget Sound or in Copenhagen, not Copenhagen, but Stockholm, where it's really just a city of a bunch of islands. And so operate, you know, those ferries like that off of hydrogen. Those, because you got a lot of space in the hull, you know, makes sense. Other applications, again, questionable.
Yeah, well, you know, in this article about China, it talks about China has surpassed its renewable energy targets for solar, for wind,
Yep.
for hydropower.
Yep.
They've surpassed all of those. Only one they haven't hit has been their targets on nuclear. And I think one of the things is I think
kind of
nuclear takes
glad
a
of
lot.
that.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I think part of it is there's an obvious ramp up time. You don't throw up a nuclear power plant in a few weeks, right?
Oh, please,
Whereas you can
no.
get some solar installed or some wind installed pretty fast.
Yeah. Oh, they are. By the way, did you hear that they're going to build the next successor to the Three Gorges Dam
No.
in the area that they control of Tibet? That's a huge.
Okay.
They're going to build a huge hydroelectric facility there, which I guess will rival the Three Gorges Dam. I don't know, but that's the next big hydro project in China.
Well, anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting to see that they're that far ahead of their targets.
Back years ago on April Fool's Day, I issued an email that was a fake press release from the Chinese government that said that as of I gave some kind of a date, a year or two away. As of this date, the China has ordered that all its car makers will no longer build internal combustion engine vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people that was real. Well, no, it wasn't real. It was just an April Fool's Day joke. But someday the joke's going to be on me because that's going to happen. And
it's going to happen.
We may be pretty close to it as we go forward.
I all the time when I read my emails and I'll have like news coming in and I'll see a news headline, I look to see first off if it was from an actual news site or if it was from because I like satire news.
Right.
And often I can't tell. I can't tell when I read the headline if it's real or if it's made up, So you just you never know. Let's talk about California a little bit. We love to talk about weirdness going on in California. So apparently their high occupancy vehicle, which people lovingly called the hover lane, is so the allowing certain clean air or clean fueled vehicles to use it expires on September 30th of 2025.
Yeah.
So the idea has been that electric cars and hydrogen cars, and I don't know if there's any other vehicles that were eligible, they could drive in the hover lane.
The Prius was, hybrids were allowed.
Okay. Hybrids were allowed. Yeah. That's going to end. But California's hit some pretty big targets on, adoption. Now, I'm wondering if they will bring this back.
Okay. Well, here's the deal. From what I understand from that article is that the Governor Newsom has extended it. So technically, it will continue. It won't end in 2025. It'll go forward. However, for that to happen, the government transportation department has to issue a waiver for them to allow that to happen. And of course, if there had been a Harris administration, that's probably a good chance that would be extended. With the new incoming administration, it's uncertain. We just don't know. So if the federal government, the new administration, under the new administration, allows it to be extended, then it will be. Because
why doesn't Pete Buttigieg do it now?
Well, because that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
I'm just saying. I mean,
and it may have to do with, may have to do with Congress too. So that I don't understand, but it is questionable whether it'll be extended or not.
Yeah, I'm just saying. You'd think that. I mean, it doesn't sound like it requires like a huge effort on the part of the federal government. I mean, the Secretary of Transportation could do it right now. I mean, I don't know
Good point. I don't know.
what's the big deal. I mean,
hey, somebody, if one of the listeners knows the answer to that, post it.
yeah.
In
Oh
the
yeah.
comment, please.
Yep. So that was kind of interesting to see. I mean, I guess that's a real benefit for EV owners,
Well, I
but
tell you, I enjoy the privilege when I go to visit our daughter in Seattle because she
mhm,
got tired of making that drive from Everett all the way down to SeaTac and back, because typically the airplane that we take either arrives at the beginning of rush hour in the evening or it departs at the start of rush hour in the morning. And so she has work, she has to go to work and things she just didn't want. So she would hire us a black car and
mhm.
it would pick us up. And of course, since there are two of us now, besides the driver in the black car, we get to ride the HOV lane. And believe me, it is a pleasure.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean,
Zooming past that traffic, getting to the airport on
when
time.
I lived in Memphis, we had an HOV lane. So on certain roads,
Yeah,
it wasn't super common,
yeah.
but they occasionally would have it on some
Well,
highways.
this is Highway Interstate 5 is the jugular vein of the city of Seattle and the greater Seattle area. So um,
I don't know. I
it
think they
really
make
works out
sense.
nice. Yeah.
I think it's a policy that makes sense regardless of whether you're doing it for,
What
you
I'm
know,
really waiting for is when they complete the rail system to up to her area, because then she just has to drive a couple of miles from her house over to the train station and pick us up, because you'll be able to drive from get on at the airport and take the train. That's probably going to maybe about the same time, depends on how many stops there are and things like that, but I'm sure it won't cost what it costs to hire a black car for us.
well, Bill, California has demonstrated that even though they may have had all those Chinese people build the railroads from the Pacific coast out east back in the 1800s, they don't remember how to make railroads anymore. So I don't know that
Oh,
whole rail project that they've had, the high
oh,
speed rail, it's been such a non-starter. Yet they do high speed rail projects in other countries and
oh,
all
I'm
the
not talking.
time.
Yeah, I'm
It's
not talking. Yeah, no. This is the light rail system for the
oh, light
city,
rail.
the area. Oh, the light rail system
Oh, okay,
for Seattle.
for
Oh,
Seattle.
it's all the tracks and the stations are being finished right now. I mean, it's right along Interstate 5. You can see it.
Hold on, but the Seattle's had that same issue too. That massive cost overruns, cost like 7 times as much as it was supposed to, or
I don't know.
the
Yeah,
yeah,
well, you know,
I don't know. There
when
just
I
seems there's something about how trains must attract corruption or something. I haven't figured that out yet, but there seems to really be something going on when
oh
they
well.
do train projects on the West Coast. So, they all seem like great ideas, but damn, they sit there and they just fester. I really
Well,
don't know what to say.
we'll see once they get it finished. I plan on writing on it at least
Yeah,
at least once to see. Of course, we'll
you know,
see.
I I like talking about the Brightline Railroad down in southern Florida, and they
Yeah,
keep expanding that one. So now I think you can go all the way. I'm not sure how far north it goes now, but you can. I know you can go all the way from Miami all the way to Orlando,
yeah.
and then they
I think they recently had an accident. It hit a vehicle on the. There was a
probably,
vision on it. Yeah.
yeah, you get plenty of people who like to go. You have the train arms go down, and the people
Right.
think they can drive around them. I mean,
Yeah.
um, there's
What you
dumb
don't
people being born every day.
what you don't want to do. This happened to me when I was living in southern West Virginia and had to go over into Kentucky. And there were two train tracks, right? They're parallel train
Hmm.
tracks, and the thing came down. And maybe there wasn't a guard there. But what happened was the one train finally passed, And I said,
Hmm.
okay, well, I can cross now. And what I didn't realize is behind that other train was another train coming from the other direction. So, oh crap! I just, just barely missed getting hit by a train. So, yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, that you just don't know. You don't want to mess with trains.
No.
But yeah, but the Bright Line's not a high speed railroad, but it's really a nice
Yeah.
way to get around. But I mean,
It'll be,
it covers a lot of Southern Florida, and there's a couple others. So I think you have like 3 private train operators that operate in Southern Florida
yeah,
in
it
some
makes
way or
sense.
another. Yeah, and
Makes
it's
sense.
interesting to see how that's played out. Now, of course, high speed rail would be getting people around really fast there, but I'm just amazed at, you got the Seattle one, you got the whole the big one there. Well, you got the light rail in Seattle, you got the high speed rail in California, and it just always
Yeah.
seems to be something going on, especially
Well,
when
that
you look
one,
at a
yeah,
country like Spain, who's done so well with their projects on
yeah,
high
yeah.
speed rail.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's been a bunch of political obstacles thrown up in the California one. The Seattle one, I don't, other than I see the progress being made every time we go out to, out to Seattle. It's getting a little further, and a little further, and a little further. So,
It's kind of like the environmental activists over in Germany that have tried to, you know, attack Tesla, over in Germany. It's like, because they're not green enough,
yeah,
and I'm just like, I guess, at what point does it end, right? So
yeah.
I don't know. It gets to a point, it's like, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you really want?
Well,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting. I guess hopefully we'll learn more as we go along. Coming back to the original story we talked about, uh, you know, the uh, uh, the incident in the tragedy in New Orleans, and then outside of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. Um, it'll be interesting if we ever learn anything about what those particular people's allegiances. I mean, why? Why Trump Tower? Is that a political thing because of what? Well, I'd always sort of assumed that Trump was, well, he wasn't pro-Arab, but then, you know, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, why they did that and why electric, for crying out loud.
Well,
Why I
because
could.
they probably read somewhere that electric cars explode. I'm
Oh
just
well.
telling you. I mean,
Okay.
they've
Well,
clearly
who
gotten the
knows?
wrong information, because
Yeah.
I've looked, I've searched the internet for images of electric cars exploding. I can find them with AI. I can create a, picture of an electric car
Yeah.
exploding with AI, but there are no pictures of electric cars exploding
Yeah.
because they don't. You know, and so
Well, that being said, there have been cases of electric bicycles that have just haven't. When that little electric bicycle battery
Mhm.
goes up, I mean, it's not like a hand grenade going off, but it's enough to set things on fire around it. So if
Okay.
you want to call that an explosion, but obviously the Las Vegas one was other incendiaries that were used and not the lithium battery.
Yeah. Well, one last article I wanted to cover,
Okay.
and this was about Renault. So Renault is making they're calling it the
Yeah.
E-Tech
Right.
T truck with a single charge range of 375 miles.
Yeah.
So now there's other companies that are making, electric trucks. Lots of companies are jumping into that space, but it's a pretty good range for one. And um, see what we got. And they're saying 600 kilometers on a single charge. Development of public charging infrastructure networks by 2026. This is a French company, but
Mm-hmm.
Renault, they've made hybrid and electric trucks since 2009, but its mass
They,
production didn't start until
yeah,
2020.
some of the very first electric delivery postal delivery truck was by Renault, and that was done. I'm thinking it was earlier than 2009. I'm thinking it goes back, earlier than that. But they had those vehicles. I think they ended up putting like a range extender with it because these things had been they early deployed them down in the kind of Swiss Alps area of France, and so they had a lot of rugged country and hills and things they had to climb. But they've been in this space for a long time. In fact, they were the ones, the very first. I think it was Renault, the very first electric cars that they offered of the modern era was a Mitsubishi IMEVs that they brought into the country and rebadged them as Renaults.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I just thought that was interesting because they're, it's along the lines of the Cybertruck, or not the Cybertruck, the Tesla semi.
Semi-truck.
Yeah, and which has up to about a 500-mile range. So, this is interesting. This article actually said that the average large truck is driven about 500 miles a day.
Yeah.
Okay. And, 375 miles, gives it most of that range. Typically, so it's going to have to be charged at some point to go the average, but you would more likely use one of these for a local truck. Yeah. Driving around, running trips around the city versus maybe going city to city. Yeah. And the one they showed in their image was more of not a really, really big cab truck. It's
it was a cab over. I don't know what it wouldn't. I don't think here in the U.S. Well, yeah, it's a cab over, but I don't know what. Yeah, it could be a Class 8, but it just depends on
wasn't quite as big as it could be. Anyways, Bill, that was all we really had for today.
All right. And, well, thanks for all the people that tuned in. We really appreciate it. It's a great way for us to start the year. Hope you keep coming back. I'm on every Tuesday and Thursday, God willing, and the tooth doesn't hurt.
Yeah, poor Mike. We've had Christmas and New Year's on his last two.
On his days, yeah.
On his days, but he'll be back with me next week.
With the family. Yep. He's a family guy.
Yeah, not a problem. Anyways, folks, thanks for tuning in today, and we'll be back on Tuesday.